So it is 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started with today's Coug Connect. My name is Laura Hamilton. I am the Area HR Administrator for the WSU Spokane campus for health sciences. And what we're going to talk about today is strategies for addressing specific employee reactions. As I do work with different managers, a lot of times the hesitation that people feel in addressing performance issues or behavior issues or just daily concerns that might come up in the workplace is this area of, but I don't know how the employee is going to respond. And so I really feel that managers, if we have the ability to have the tools ahead of time, that really could help us through any different employee reaction that we could face and have that in our toolbox, then it makes it easier to then engage in those difficult conversations and make sure we're setting clear expectations. So what I'm going to be going through is just some common employee reactions that you will see during times of providing some critical feedback, some things to avoid in those situations, and then best practices in how to address those reactions. So the first one that we're going to start with is when we have employees who deflect the conversation. They try to change the focus to another employee's alleged behavior. So definitely we want to avoid allowing the direction of the conversation to be changed from the original focus. We really want to avoid focusing on other people's behaviors. You should, as a manager, take note of the concerns that are being shared because there may be some validity to them, but that doesn't in any way negate the performance or behavior issues that you've already thought through and are ready to discuss with this employee. Really, it's important to avoid engaging in that dialogue of asking the employee for additional information about other people. And we should not be backing down or offering to rescind our statements or our expectations with our employees. Hopefully, when you are sitting down with them, it's with factual information, it's with objective measures, and so you've already thought through the process to the point that it is important to go ahead and have the conversation about their specific actions and the concerns. And so reflect back to the employee, realign the conversation, reflect back the specific action or concern. As needed, you can repeat, we're here today to talk about your behavior, or we're here today to talk about your performance. And make sure that you let them know that you deal with each situation as appropriate and that you appreciate the information. But again, today we're here to discuss your performance and your behavior. Focusing on the employee's accountability and ensuring that you're explaining the expectations and that they must fulfill them. So not just that, I don't like that this happened, but an expectation of what you would like to see in the future as a response to a certain concern or issue when it comes up. And then making sure that you're sending a follow-up communication to the employee to reiterate the expectations that you discussed and invite them to ask any questions. When we are having conversations with employees about performance, about behaviors, a lot of times people will go into a headspace where they're not really hearing what's being shared with them. So that follow-up email where we're restating the expectations really is key and critical to experiencing a change in those behaviors. And it also serves as good documentation if the behavior does continue, that we can move to further steps in addressing the performance or the behaviors. The employee has an excuse for any concern that you try to address. So definitely mistakes to avoid is accepting the excuses, showing agreement. A lot of times as we're having, it's human nature as we're having conversations with individuals to nod our head. But if we're in a meeting with an employee where we're trying to set expectations or realign behaviors, and they're trying to share with us an excuse, if we're nodding our head, it is showing agreement. And so we want to be really careful about body language as a manager when we're having those conversations, so that we're hearing and actively listening, but that we're not necessarily engaging in those traditional niceties in some of the physical reactions. So please do not give focused attention to the excuses either. We're really not there to have the conversation about the excuses behind certain things. Now, if there are valid points that they're bringing up, certainly worthwhile to hear those, to listen to those, and maybe tweak some of the expectations with consideration. But be very careful about that, because again, you've spent a lot of time coming to the point of being ready to address the performance concern or the behavior. So there should be some real objective measures and fact behind what you're sharing with them. So keep focused on the performance concerns and your expectations. If there are things that are shared as a part of the excuses that are personal in nature, make sure that you're offering the resources of EAP. If they're related to a health issue, please make sure you're referring them to disability services for information about leave, if that's something that they need, or about an accommodation. Make sure that you are providing the employee specific examples of the area of concern and not generalities. And explain how their performance or the behavior is impacting your colleagues, the department, the institution, our different stakeholders. Again, be sure that you're clear about the expectations and are sending that follow-up communication to the employee. An employee claims discrimination and or favoritism, and they threaten to sue. Mistakes to avoid is engaging in a discussion or an argument about the allegations that they've made, or telling them not to file a complaint about you or about discrimination. Don't back down. Don't offer to rescind your statement or your expectations. Make sure that you are focused on the performance concerns, that you are providing specific examples, again, explaining how that performance or behavior is impacting the department, stating clear expectations. If it is appropriate in situations, if you have an individual that this is a common occurrence, you can invite your HRS consultant to attend the meeting with you. Please make sure if discrimination comes up during the conversation, as a manager, you are a mandatory reporter. So make sure that you're referring the employee to CCR. Invite them to contact CCR if they choose, and explain that you do still have the performance related concerns, irrespective of their feelings about what has led to those. And so don't shy away from offering those resources to your employee. We should be very openly offering that as a resource to individuals. We can learn as managers if there are things we're unintentionally doing that's causing difficulties for our employees. It's important that we're learning those things through some of these processes. The employee points out that you, the manager or the supervisor, makes mistakes. All of us make mistakes, and so there is a likelihood that some of what they share may be accurate. But again, arguing and defending yourself, whether or not you've made a mistake, is not the purpose and the intention of the meeting. So ensuring that they're aware that you're going to document any information that they have to share, but refocus the conversation back on their performance with a commitment to look into anything that they have shared that you might need to take a look at, check the facts. Let them know that you will look into it. And if you are wrong, it's okay to apologize and say that you were wrong on something. Being wrong on a mistake that you made does not mean that the performance issue or the behavior that they're exhibiting doesn't still exist. And so make sure that those two things are being separated. The employee becomes emotional or cries. This can be really difficult. I know I have this huge compassion for people, and so it is hard for me when individuals are showing that sort of emotion to not want to comfort them and to try to make it okay. But you need to make sure that you're not responding with emotion, that you don't start to become emotional. If emotion is taking over the conversation, that's a good time to hit pause and say, you know what, I think we need to take a step back from this conversation. Let's readdress this at another time, but making sure that you are coming back and readdressing it. Sometimes those situations, it is natural to start to doubt your own statement or your expectations. Be really clear about the facts that back up the conversation that you're having with your employee. So make sure you're remaining calm, that you're showing care, but not emotion. Please do give them a moment to become composed. composed if they need to. If you have an employee who you have some sort of expectation that they may become emotional, make sure you have tissues available and offer those. Acknowledge the emotions. So, I can see that this is really difficult for you and for you to hear this information. Should we touch base at another time so that you have some time to process the information, then we can readdress the expectations. But again, making sure that you are then going back and having that conversation at a later time and not just sweeping it under the rug. So employees sometimes will respond unprofessionally or with a little bit of an attitude. So again, make sure you're not allowing emotion to take over the conversation. Please don't respond defensively or try to get into an argument about it. You've done a lot of research. Don't doubt your statements or your expectations, and make sure, again, we're not telling them that we were wrong and rescind our statement and expectations, unless, of course, we find through the course of the conversation that holds to be true. But hopefully we've done enough work on the front end with fact finding and having some objective information to share that that's not going to be the case. So stay focused on the task at hand, again, providing those very specific examples, explaining how their performance or behaviors are impacting the team, and then what your expectations are moving forward, and following up on those in writing afterwards. If they become angry, this can be really difficult. Please do not respond with anger or yell, and don't allow that emotion to take over the conversation. Again, sometimes this can lead to doubt over our statements or our actions. Don't allow that to occur as long as you have done all of the work ahead of time and have that objective information to share. So it is important that we're remaining calm in those situations. If we remain calm, sometimes we can help that anger to dissipate. Don't get angry or show anger. That's going to escalate the situation. And you can ask them calmly, please, I'm going to ask that you don't yell. I can see this is upsetting you, but that's not appropriate for the workplace. Offer to give them time to process the information and to come back and address it once the emotions are controlled. If you do suspect, if you have an employee that you suspect as you're having the conversation that this anger emotion is going to become a part of it, consider having a third party present for the conversation. And so that could either be your higher level supervisor joins you for the conversation. You can check in with the HRS consultant to see if it would be appropriate for them to attend the meeting. Some sort of third party can oftentimes keep people from going to that place of anger. And again, stay focused on the purpose of the meeting. Follow up in writing afterwards with the expectations. When people are in that place of anger, it's very difficult for them to actually hear and understand what's being shared with them and to remember at another point. So the employee blames you, the manager or the supervisor, for their low performance. It's important not to take those comments personally, not to accept the blame unless something they've stated is accurate. In those cases, we want to make sure that we're taking accountability. Don't become defensive or emotional. Don't allow the focus or the direction of the conversation to be changed from where you were originally intending for it to go. Make sure you are remaining calm. A lot of individuals know how to push buttons. If we've worked with people for any amount of time, they probably know what those trigger points are for us. So don't allow there to be any sort of reactionary response if an employee attempts to do that. Again, reflect the very specific concern back to the employees. As needed, you can repeat, hey, we're here today to discuss your behavior. Again, explain the explicit concerns and how it impacts the department, and really focus on their accountability and your expectations, and that they must fulfill those expectations. An employee blames other people for low performance. So not necessarily you as the manager, but other members of the team, or maybe not even individuals on the team. So again, don't allow that conversation, the shift of the focus of the conversation to go to other people. Make sure you are focusing on their behaviors and their performance, not on the behaviors and performance of others. Don't ask the employee for more information about the performance of others. You can let them know that there's things that you would be willing to look into, but this meeting today is to discuss their performance and their behavior, again, focusing on their accountability and following up on those concerns. They indicate they didn't understand or didn't know the expectations. So in this situation as a manager, sometimes if you've been the one communicating the expectations, it can be really difficult to hear from someone that they didn't know what those expectations were. So again, you're going to have to be prepared to not get angry or defensive, to not get into an argument about it, but instead to refer back to what your expectations are. If you do have performance evaluations, position description, or prior communications where you have explicitly stated what the expectations are, refer to those. Offer to provide them copies of any of that documentation where you've previously discussed the concerns. Again, state what the clear expectations are and provide the follow-up in writing to make sure that those are understood. This is a part of why it is important that we're following up conversations on expectations with our employees in writing, is if they do later come back and indicate that they weren't aware of what the expectations were, we have something to go back to really help us through the conversation. It's not a gotcha situation, but instead it's a tool to say, okay, so here's what I'm communicating. Somehow the communications aren't coming through in the way they were intended. Help me understand what piece of this isn't clear so that I can make sure that you know what the expectations are. So it just gives that added tool and talking point for the conversations. So sometimes we will have employees who will focus on areas where they perform really well and want those to negate any areas of poor performance. So it's definitely a mistake to allow the direction of the conversation to be changed from that original focus. You don't want to spend the majority of the conversation focusing on the areas that they perform well. Instead, you want to remain calm. You want to share that, hey, your performance in these areas is phenomenal, and that's not a question. But really what we're here to discuss today is this particular area. So it's okay to acknowledge awareness that they perform well in certain areas, but that the focus of this particular meeting is on a separate set of expectations, which does make it very important, again, that we're able to provide those specific examples, sharing with them how it impacts the department, stating what the expectations are, and really helping them to understand, for you to look like you're performing well in this area, this is what that would look like. That way they can start to formulate a really clear picture of where they can engage in some changes. An employee indicates that they didn't understand or know the expectations. Again, it's not helpful to get angry or defensive or to get in an argument. You can refer back to the prior information. I think this one's a little bit of a duplicate of what I went through before. So an employee disagrees with the assessment. It is okay for the employee to disagree with the assessment, but it's important to make sure that we are still able to demonstrate to them what our expectations are, that you don't have to agree with my standpoint on it, but this is my expectation as the manager of the department. This is why it's important to me. This is how it impacts other people. So I am going to ask you to engage in this way. Having those objective examples or evidence to support your assessment can sometimes be helpful in getting them to a place of understanding and agreement. But at the end of the day, they don't have to agree with what you're stating. It's still important to make sure that the expectations are really clear. Sometimes we'll have situations where we've received information from a third party or a concern has brought up, and employees will want to know and understand who it is that provided the information about the concern. It is a mistake to provide the information about the specific employees. It can cause a lot of damage to working relationships, and it is important that we're able to address performance concerns and maintain some confidentiality. So prior to the meeting, though, it is important that you've ensured that you've done fact-finding and that the information that you've been provided is accurate, that you've independently been able to identify that it is accurate information. So you're going to want to stick to the facts, maintain a focus, Provide those specific examples, and then again, follow up your expectations in writing. The employee gets up and walks out of the meeting before the conversation is finished. So definitely we don't want to go chasing after the employee. Don't yell down the hallway to the employee to try to get them back into the room to finish the conversation. Making a scene is not helpful for anyone in the workplace. And making judgmental or inappropriate or sarcastic comments down the hallway as someone's leaving is unhelpful as well. So it is important in those situations, though, that you document what has occurred, that you're contacting HRS for support and guidance on how to move forward. Our recommendation is going to be that you set up another meeting. In some of those situations, we'll recommend that you're inviting a third party to attend the meeting. You're really going to want to know and understand what led to the circumstances, and so it's hard to provide additional guidance because they are going to be one-off situations depending on what specifically is happening. So that's where contacting HRS for that support and guidance will be really important. If you have an employee who verbally or physically threatens you as the manager, supervisor, or others in the department, it's important that we're not threatening the employee back and that we're not backing down and offering to rescind expectations because of those threats. If you do believe ahead of time that there's a possibility that this may be a part of the dynamics of the meeting, prepare ahead of time. You're going to want to sit closest to the door so that you have an exit strategy in case things do get aggressive during the meeting. It is important in those circumstances that you have a third party. If you have some sort of expectation that it may go that way and you're concerned about it, you can always contact campus security, campus police, and pre-arrange to have someone available and some sort of signal or measure that if you say a certain word that they know that they need to come in and help and support you. So you don't necessarily, even in those circumstances, need to have someone physically in the room with you. But you could have someone who is really close by and available in case things end up going poorly. Be prepared to end the conversation and send the employee home for the remainder of the day if things do get difficult during the conversation. Please make sure that you are working with HRS if these things are happening. If there is an expectation ahead of time, work with your consultant on what the best plan is. And then finally, one of the employee reactions, unfortunately, that sometimes we will see is an employee who is in a place where they threaten to harm themselves. Please don't make inappropriate comments or panic. It can be difficult in those situations to maintain composure, but be aware ahead of time that it's a possibility. So you're going to want to remain calm. In those situations, you're going to want to use the most soothing voice possible. You'll definitely want to refer the employee to EAP, call for assistance as necessary. If you need to call campus security, if you need to call campus police, please be willing to do that. Be willing also to continue the conversation at another time. Sometimes employees are having a really bad day and need the grace to be able to have a conversation at another time. But please make sure anytime you are about to engage in a conversation with an employee that you have resource materials available and ready. If you don't have those readily available in your department now, reach out to your HR consultant to make sure that you have those and are able to provide them as you're having these sorts of meetings. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, I think it's really important as we are preparing to have conversations that we're spending the time to thoughtfully consider and be prepared for different reactions that employees may have. I think especially right now where we're working under very different dynamics than we're used to, employee reactions can be very different than what we would normally anticipate or expect. So I want to say a big thank you for joining us today. The meetings on KuConnect are now on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Please make sure that you are logging into your Smart Health app and logging these because they do count towards some of your credits on that. And the next session will be on the 25th and it will be on mental health and well-being. Thanks you guys, and I hope you have a fantastic Thursday.